Hi, and welcome to this special Elementor webinar where we'll learn about headless and static WordPress websites and find out if it's something for you. We'll understand how these two technologies, when put together, are able to generate clean WordPress websites that are highly secure and load incredibly fast, especially when traffic increases exponentially. And who better to do this with none other than Miriam, co-founder and head of Strattic, which is a static hosting solution for secure, high-performance WordPress websites, which recently joined Elementor in its mission to solve the challenges faced by millions of WordPress web creators around the world. Welcome, Miriam, and thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
It's great having you. Please, if you could tell just a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the WordPress world.
So about 15 years ago, I was exposed to the world of digital marketing, and I got really excited about what websites could do in particular for that, and I actually taught myself to build websites. And then I stumbled upon the world of WordPress, basically fell in love with it, and that became my profession for the years to come. I founded a WordPress development agency and serviced many businesses, organizations, tech companies, nonprofits, government even, building them high-quality WordPress websites over the years.
Right. And did you come across any issues or pain points along the road?
So as the years went along and we were offering the web building services to our clients, we were also offering ongoing maintenance and support types of packages to them in order to help them keep their websites secure, stable, and give them help when they needed it. That was a great offering for them and for us. But as the years went on, we just found ourselves spending more and more time supporting them in their various needs. And the reason for that is that as WordPress's market share grew, it became a favorite target for hackers around the world who were looking to breach websites for various reasons. And so we, the site managers or site owners, were finding ourselves just constantly defending against hacker bots and then having sometimes to clean up the mess when they get through. Also, performance became more of an issue. It became increasingly important, particularly for search engine optimization and if running paid ad campaigns and just for general user experience. While WordPress sites in particular were starting to get heavier and not necessarily able to keep up with the demands of the modern web.
Right. And if I can ask, how come did you found Strattic?
So at a certain point, I started to wonder if me and my team at our agency were doing right by our clients by only offering them WordPress services. On the one hand, I love WordPress. I think it's a very powerful tool that really enables people to create content as needed in an almost frictionless way. But on the other hand, once that content has been created and published to the web, the maintenance and management of the sites was becoming too much of a headache and even embarrassing sometimes. So I started to explore what other solutions were out there on the web at the time in terms of any trends that were developing around building websites. And I came across some trends that were known as static site generation or headless, and also sometimes known as Jamstack. And I got very excited because sites built in those formats basically had none of the big issues that WordPress was suffering from. So these sites didn't have security issues, they didn't have performance issues, and they didn't have scaling issues. And I was like, well, maybe this is the future of web building. But what I saw was that while the delivery of a ready-made website through these platforms or approaches was great, creating the content and managing it was pretty painful. And right. The CMSs, the content management systems available for this approach, didn't come close to what WordPress offers. So I thought, okay, WordPress is amazing at content management. This approach of static site generation is amazing at deploying very resilient, fast, and secure websites. Maybe we bring these two worlds together, and that's where I came up with the concept for Strattic.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that with us. And also, I'm looking forward to today to delving deeper into the world of WordPress websites, also with you and with our viewers. So let's just go ahead and see what's on the menu. What we'll do is we'll start off by going over traditional WordPress. So we'll have a base to compare with when we address headless and static WordPress. And we'll also talk about these concepts and understand their benefits and challenges. Then what we'll do is we'll learn what Strattic comes to solve. And we'll find out how it's able to provide the best of both worlds, which is being able to use WordPress like you know and love, while enjoying the benefits of static and headless websites altogether. Afterwards, what we'll do is we'll talk about who Strattic is for and what some of the reasons are that website owners decide to convert their website to static architecture. And lastly, what we'll do is we'll check out the Strattic platform, and we'll also finish with an FAQ session where you will answer frequently asked questions, which is going to be interesting. So Miriam, let's start off with a quick overview of what we're familiar with, which is traditional WordPress websites and how they work.
In the world of traditional or regular WordPress websites, what you have is one installation that covers everything. That installation has the infrastructure, which is the server stack. In the world of WordPress, it's generally what's known as the LAMP stack: Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Then, of course, you have the WordPress software itself, which is installed there, and then any plugins you've installed, and of course, your themes that give your site its appearance.
Right.
And then tightly intertwined with that is the front end of your site, or the part of your website that web visitors access to basically visit your website. And those two components are actually almost one component because they all are just completely intertwined with each other. And it's often called or referred to as a monolithic architecture.
Right. So it's one package. It's all in one, and that's also why we love WordPress so much. And also, if you could perhaps just give a little bit of background how pages are generated with traditional WordPress websites.
You're correct that is what gives WordPress the power that we love, because the way that a page is generated in WordPress is that an editor goes into the backend, which is called the admin area, logs in, makes any changes that they want in the editor, which is very user-friendly, and then all they have to do is click the WordPress publish button or update button, and then their changes are immediately visible on the front end. Now, how are they visible to the user? Anytime a user comes to a WordPress website and requests through their browser to view a particular page, let's say they want to view the team page of a company. So the browser sends a message to the WordPress site. It says, we want to see the team page now. Right. And WordPress actually generates that page on the fly for them. It starts pulling in data from the database, and it processes PHP, and it generates an HTML page and delivers it to the user.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Also, WordPress does have some challenges, if you would like to expand on that a bit.
So while that process is very powerful, it's kind of like in Spider-Man, how they say, with great power comes great responsibility. All of the functionality that goes towards generating that page for the user on the fly can also cause issues. So first of all, you can imagine that type of process is resource intensive, because it's essentially building the page for pretty much every user. And so that demands server resources and database functioning, et cetera. And it's doing that over and over again. Also, in order to be able to do that, this monolithic architecture that we talked about means that a lot of different layers and moving parts are all connected to the front end. So if anything goes wrong with any of that, you will also see it reflected on the front end.
Which are plugins and themes.
Plugins that conflict, or even just someone clicks the wrong thing and suddenly you've got the white screen of death, or a broken page, or the CSS is messed up. Anything like that can happen very, very easily when your backend is like totally connected to the front end. And so on the one hand, yes, a page can be easily generated for a user, even though, like I said, it uses a lot of resources. And on the other hand, a page can easily be messed up for a user all the same.
So I just want to sum it up, just so it's clear over here. Traditional WordPress websites, they tie the WordPress admin and the database directly to the live websites. And also the pages, they don't exist as pre-rendered files. They're generated on the fly by accessing the database and all the parts needed to render the page. Now let's see how headless and static WordPress differs from traditional WordPress. So let's start with headless WordPress. Miriam, please go ahead.
There are a lot of terms and terminology around this modern approach to web development, and headless is definitely one of them. Headless is not like the Headless Horseman or something creepy. It's referring to the architecture of the site, where the head is separated from the body. So what's the head and what's the body in the case of WordPress or any site? The head is the front end of the site, the visual presentation layer that website visitors access, and that's the head. And then the body is the back end or the admin area or whatever powers the data layer of a website.
Right.
So as we said, in WordPress, they're tightly intertwined. They are together. In the case of a headless architecture, they are separated or decoupled, and they are not connected in the same way.
So that's the purest way to explain it, is that they're just not connected. There's no direct link anymore.
Right.
All right. And what are the benefits that come with headless WordPress?
By decoupling the head from the body or creating a headless website, you do gain a number of benefits. So one is performance. Because they're not so tightly intertwined, if the server or the back end is having issues, it has less of an impact on the front end. And in many cases, rendering the page, while in the case of headless, there is some kind of rendering happening, it's not as heavy. So you can gain performance benefits from that. You can gain scaling benefits. Also, for the same reason, the server's not as connected, so load doesn't impact the ability to view the front end of the page like it might on WordPress.
Right.
And even there is a security benefit, because most of the security breaches happen on the back end. That's low-hanging fruit for hackers and hacker bots. And when the back end isn't as readily available, then it makes it harder for the site to be breached.
Okay, thank you. So basically, we need something that will update the content and the design on the front end, right?
Right, of course, we want our visitors to come to a website that is beautiful and useful, right? Just like with any website. So in order to do that in headless architecture, there are a number of factors. One, you need developers, like actual developers, to update the structure of your front end of your site. There's way less flexibility for non-developers to update the front end of the site. In WordPress, a person can just drag and drop a page into place, like with Elementor, and immediately see the results on the front end.
Right.
But that's because it's a monolithic architecture. In the case of headless, you don't have that benefit. And the other component that contributes to what it is that people see when they visit the site is the content itself, obviously. And how does that content get to the front end? It's through APIs, and in the case of WordPress, there's a REST API, and that is what pushes the content into the front end. So
that's one way to go.
So that's one way to go. And that gives you some of the benefits around speed, security, and scalability, as we mentioned. However, it does have its drawbacks, like the lack of flexibility, and even security is still a concern in this approach. Another approach is to go in the direction of static site generation. Static site generation and headless kind of overlap in some ways, because when you statically generate a site, it is also headless. And the reason it's headless is because the front end is also decoupled from the back end.
Right.
But that front end is generated in a different way.
So what exactly is a statically generated website? How does that differ from the traditional WordPress website?
In the case of a statically generated site, the site that you end up with is essentially a collection of static files. What does that mean? Static sounds boring, right? Nobody wants to be static. Everyone wants to be dynamic, either personally or your
static,
website.
It sounds like you've got
sounds like
not a dynamic website.
Right, it sounds boring.
Right.
It sounds like it's not going to be interesting. So in this case, static doesn't refer to the functionality on the site or whether the site is colorful or dynamic or useful. What it refers to is the architecture. And it is a site that is fully comprised of static files. What is a static file? Static file is a standalone file that is pre-rendered and already exists and is ready to be served up to the user. Static files are HTML files, which is the content of the page. It's CSS, which gives it its design, JavaScript, which can give it a lot of dynamic functionality, and images and media and videos. All of those are static files, and they are all ready to go and pre-rendered in the case of a statically generated site.
If you can pinpoint, what exactly would be the benefits of having a statically generated website?
A statically generated website essentially removes all of the concerns that people may have in the world of traditional WordPress or other platforms. For example, a statically generated site, because every page is pre-rendered, it means that instead of it having to be built on the fly for every user that requests it, it's just ready to go and it's served to the user really quickly in their browser. In addition, because every page exists in a standalone pre-rendered format, it can be fully served up through something called a CDN, which is a content delivery network.
Right.
A content delivery network makes the site available all around the world. It creates replicas. The benefit of that is that if I'm in Australia, I will access the site in the closest location to me in Australia. And if I'm in the States, I'll access it in the States. That matters because actually, if data has to travel distance, you will feel that as the end user, and it creates a certain slowness or latency. So once a site can be fully served up through a CDN, it's fast, out of the box because it's pre-rendered, but it's also fast everywhere in the world.
So, well, instead of generating it many times to multiple users, you just generate it once and it's basically ready to go, whoever needs to see it.
Exactly. So instead of Jim requesting the page and it's generated for him, and then Jane requests it and it's generated for her, the page is generated once, and then everyone who wants it gets it. And so it's ready to go, and it's delivered to them very, very fast.
Right. So that's also where the scalability comes in a sense. All right. Thank you. It sounds really, really good. I'm sure there are also some challenges or maybe some limitations with pure statically generated websites.
Challenges? Why? Everything works perfectly. Yes, there are challenges. Like with everything, there's pros and cons. So the challenges around statically generated sites are the following. One, because the site is decoupled and not connected to a backend, it means that some functionality that might work on a WordPress site, for example, may not work on the statically generated site. There are ways to work around that. There are other solutions, but it's something to keep in mind that can be a challenge. And
Right.
if sites are very dynamic, like WooCommerce sites that depend heavily on the database and the processing server, then those can be a very significant challenge to serve up statically. It's not impossible, but it is more challenging.
You require more resources, more dev resources to
Yes.
find a different way to do that. Let's talk about the build process maybe. How does that work?
In standard or traditional WordPress, you create content, you press the update button or publish button, and you immediately see it on the front end of the site. In the case of static site generation, in order to generate every page, a standalone page, it has to go through what's known as a build process. And that process, depending on the size of the site, can be a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes, or in the cases of huge sites, hours. Obviously, that is not a user-friendly workflow.
Right.
You don't want to spend hours waiting for the content that you've created
And also when you
to appear.
Sorry to interrupt. When you're busy changing, you want to preview it as well. I'm
Right.
sure that also impacts.
Yes, so exactly. So in the case of WordPress, we know we can preview content that we've created before publishing it live to make sure that it looks the way we want it to look. Creating a preview experience in statically generated sites is nearly impossible. And definitely isn't one-to-one. So you can't actually truly preview your content and make sure it is the way it should be before publishing it.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, so just to sum it up, headless WordPress websites, they make sure that the back-end part of the site, the body, isn't directly connected to the front end, the head. And static sites, they convert your WordPress website into pre-rendered files and pages, so there's no need to generate them like traditional WordPress does. So basically, this is where Strattic comes into play, right? Combining the headless and the static architecture together on one platform.
At Strattic, we have tried to bring the best of all worlds in the best possible way to our users. So you get the benefits of headless and static in terms of performance, which is super fast, and scalability. No need to worry about server load or running campaigns that might take down your server or DDoS attacks or anything like that. And security is no longer a concern because even if your WordPress site has vulnerabilities, they have nothing to do with a statically generated site.
Right. So what exactly is Strattic? What does it come to solve?
So Strattic enables users to continue using WordPress as they're used to, and all they have to do is click a button, and that will kick off a process that generates the static version of the site and fully serves it up through the CDN that we offer all of our users. So we take care of all of these parts of the platform. The WordPress hosting area, which is secure and containerized. Only people with permission can access it, so the hacker bots of the web cannot access it. So even if there's a vulnerability, they just can't get to it.
Right.
And it also spins down when not in use, which adds another layer of security because if it doesn't exist, you can't hack it.
So it's not awake all the time.
It's not awake
just
all
like
the time.
traditional to render those pages.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be awake all the time. Having a WordPress site running all the time, even if nobody's editing the content, is kind of a wasteful and risky way of running a website because it's like leaving your car with the engine running in the driveway all the time, even if you're not driving it.
That's a good one. All right. Also, just to be clear, Strattic isn't a plugin. Strattic is a platform.
Exactly.
It's an all-in-one hosting solution, just like you mentioned. All right. So let's just have a look at how it actually works. I know that you've prepared a demo website for us to see. So let's just share your screen and maybe you can walk us through on how it works.
Okay. So if you're a Strattic user and you want to make changes to your WordPress site, you first need to log into our dashboard, and this is what it looks like. And you will see all the websites that you have in your account. In every website, you can see a number of details, like the last time it was published to Strattic, what WordPress version you're running, what PHP version you're running on your site, etc. But now we want to edit our site, and so we click on Edit in WordPress. And if your site is sleeping at that time because you haven't been using it, it will wake it up.
Right.
And the container will spin up for you to use. So I've done that, and now here I am in my WordPress site.
So that's just a regular WordPress website.
Yeah. So as you can see, the WordPress backend is the same as any other WordPress backend. There's no changes here. You know, you'd manage the content, the posts, the pages. It's all managed in the same way. You
Right.
might notice one difference, which is this,
Strattic
which we
button.
add to every site. It's
There
our
we go.
fancy Strattic publish button, and I'll show you soon what that does. But that is a very important part of making sure that your content is available to users on the static version of the site. So here's my back end of the site, and here's the front end of my WordPress site, built in Elementor with a kit.
Right.
And now I am a dentist, taking on a new profession. Now, let's say I have an about page on my site, which I do, and I want to change this from most reliable to the best dentist clinic in Chicago.
Right. So just a
Right.
small change.
Just a small change. I'm going to just do a small change right now. So I'm going to go into Pages, and I'm going to edit the About page, just like you would in regular WordPress. And I'm going to change this title to the best. Okay, so that's done. And now I'm going to click Update in Elementor to make sure that these changes are visible on the actual website.
Right.
Right? So I've updated it. Let's take a look at the About page. And now I am the best dentist clinic in Chicago. Hooray. But in the case of Strattic, as I mentioned, this WordPress site is only accessible to me and my team, but
Right.
website visitors are not going to see those changes
Because it's disconnected from your
from
live
the
website.
static replica of the site or the static snapshot. So I'm going to show you the static snapshot of this site. Here it is. Now, this looks exactly the same. You could say, well, isn't this the WordPress site? And I will tell you that this is not the WordPress site. This is as if we just sliced the front end off of WordPress and presented it. So it looks the same.
Right.
But clicking through it,
And
you'll
this
notice
is
it's very
the
fast.
statically generated.
This is a statically generated snapshot of the WordPress site. One way you can test whether it's a WordPress site is if I try to go to the login page.
WP admin.
Or WP admin, which is standard in all WordPress sites, you will get a 404.
No can do.
Because there is no admin on the site. Okay,
Right.
so now let's take a look at the About page on this site. And I am still only the most reliable and not the best. I want people to know that I'm the best. So how do I get the change from the WordPress site to appear here on this site? So I updated it with Elementor, and now it's time for the Strattic magic to kick in. So we mentioned the Strattic publish button, and when you mouse over it, you have a number of options in terms of how you can publish your site to the static replica. Every Strattic user actually gets two static replicas of the site. One is called Preview, and you can see it here. That's like a staging static site. It's for you to make changes on WordPress and then test it there and see if everything is looking okay and working okay. Or the live site, which is your production site or your main site with your custom domain.
Right.
And that's where we're going to publish now. So I am going to choose one of the publish options. And in our case, I am going to choose selective publish because that will just publish this one page. And that is a very fast publish. I'm saying I only made a change to this particular page. I don't need to publish anything else on the site right now. And so I'm going to start the publish process. So you can see it's telling me it's publishing to live, and it gives me a progress bar so I know how it's doing.
Right. And what exactly is happening now behind the scenes?
Our system is identifying the change that was made and any related URLs that may be connected to the change I made. Like, for example, if I change this image, it will also detect that, and it's sending them to the live site. So now it has been published to the live site, and I'm going to check it out. And what essentially has happened is that the Strattic publishing system has generated a new version of the HTML and deployed it into the static environment. And now everyone can visit this version of the page. And you can see the publish took less than a minute, and we've got our changes live on the static site. And users will be able to access this content quickly in a scalable fashion, and the site owner doesn't have to worry about security because there's nothing to hack.
All right, great. Thank you for showing that to us, and that sounds really, really great. Actually, it sounds too good to be true. Also, there are a couple of limitations, right?
Yes.
Well, maybe not limitations, challenges.
There are challenges around static site generation in general, and then with Strattic, there are a few things to keep in mind. So first of all, like we mentioned, the static version of the site is completely disconnected from the backend. So if you have functionality that depends on the server, it may be problematic. That's why every user has the preview static site. So if they're not sure about something, they can always check it there and make sure things work okay. What's good about the timing of a product like Strattic is that in the vast majority of cases, if you're using some kind of functionality that depends on the server, there's probably an alternative or workaround for it. In the case of Strattic specifically, we've developed native support for a lot of dynamic functionality that you wouldn't get on other products. For example, forms. Forms are traditionally like pretty dynamic and dependent on databases and servers. WordPress form plugins specifically. And we support Gravity Forms, Contact Form 7, and Elementor Forms out of the box, so you don't have to make any changes. We support search. We replace all of the search on sites with a higher quality, faster search, and our users don't have to do anything in order to get that. We support all of the functionality around SEO, like 301 redirects, XML sitemap, robots.txt. So you get all of that out of the box. And if what we offer you doesn't serve your needs, we have a very useful directory on our site called the Static Tools Directory, and tools that are supported on Strattic specifically or in general on static sites are categorized there, and you can look through and find a solution that works for you.
You mentioned you've got a preview and we've got a live site. When you update a plugin on your WordPress installation, that doesn't directly affect your live site. So how would that look like workflow-wise?
So in the case of Strattic, you actually don't have to update your plugins. The reason for that being that a lot of plugin updates are related to security, and since the site is not accessible to the greater web, you don't really have to worry about it. We do recommend that our users update plugins because you don't want to get into a situation where WordPress is now at version 10 and you're using a plugin that only works, on version 6, and it can create a lot of mess. So you can and you should update your plugins, but sometimes people's concern around updating plugins is that they'll update it and then something will break. Sometimes there's a conflict. Sometimes it supports or doesn't support something. And in the case of regular WordPress, like we said, tightly intertwined, it has a direct impact on the front end of the site, and you can end up with broken pages. So that's a very big concern. In the case of Strattic, you can update your plugins with confidence because even if something breaks, that has zero impact on the website that the users are visiting. That static replica is completely disconnected and will not be impacted by any potential breakage from updating plugins. So update away, and if something breaks, go back and fix it, but you can do it at your own time and not under pressure because it's broken your site.
All right, thank you, Miriam. I think that we got a good idea on how Strattic works and what its benefits are. So let's move on to who Strattic is for and what are the main reasons a website owner would want to convert their website to static architecture on Strattic. So who would benefit from it most?
Theoretically, Strattic can be great for everyone, but there are particular types of users, or organizations, or companies where Strattic can bring them a tremendous amount of value. First of all, companies, organizations where their website is very important to them and plays an important role, whether it's related to impacting their bottom line as a support tool for sales and marketing, or an important tool for getting information out there that they need to be persistently available. Companies like that, Strattic can be very valuable to them because it ensures that their content is being delivered quickly, which can positively impact their rankings and their user experience, and that it is always available. So they don't find themselves running an expensive paid ad campaign and all the traffic takes down the site and they're losing money just every second.
So also uptime and security, people hack websites.
So people do, or bots do. Security is a very serious concern for many organizations because if their website is defaced in any way or breached, it can negatively impact them in the following ways. One, if they are a cyber-oriented company, like many of our customers, defacing may not end up stealing important information. However, it looks terrible for them as a cybersecurity company to have had their site breached. It can be any type of company where security matters to them, SaaS companies that need to look reliable, businesses, fintech companies, finance, insurance, even health-related companies. You need to make sure that the window to your organization and company is always secure. That gives your users and potential customers a feeling of security themselves.
Right.
In addition, if a site is breached, it is very painful and very expensive to clean it up. And sometimes, even once the cleanup process has completed and everyone breathes a sigh of relief and is like, okay, we can get the site back online, these hackers are smart. They leave a back door, they get in again, and you start the process all over again. You don't even want to go there. Just make sure your site is not hackable to start. And so security plays a really important role as well for these types of organizations.
So that's where the headless comes into play as well. All right, it's very interesting. Can you perhaps share a real case study with us, maybe with some stats, so we can give our viewers an idea of the benefits?
Sure. We have some really great case studies showing how our customers receive tremendous benefit from our security or our performance or scalability. So there's lots to see on our site, but in particular, I'm going to talk about Payoneer. Many people might know about Payoneer.
Payoneer, yeah.
Yeah, it's a well-known company that provides services to, I think, 43 million users or companies around the world, including huge companies like Airbnb and Google and others. And they needed to make sure that their website was always up and reliable and fast. They run campaigns, they have important information on their site for their users, and they were actually suffering from issues related to downtime, and they were pretty desperately looking for a solution.
Right.
They came across Strattic, and we implemented it for them with their sites, and they immediately saw amazing results. First of all, downtime stopped being an issue for them, which in a company like that with, I don't even know how much traffic they get to their site, every second of downtime is painful and potential loss of business.
Valuable, yeah.
Yeah, so they couldn't have that happening, and on Strattic that ceased to be an issue. When they run campaigns, the site is always up and reliable. They saw really significant performance improvements, so their server response time was reduced by 43%. That is how long it takes the server to get data to a user. On Strattic, that's very fast.
Right, that's half.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, that ends up having a very important impact or significant impact on their business's bottom line, actually. So they also saw subsequently after moving to Strattic that their conversion rate increased by almost 3%. And if you can consider the volume of a company like Payoneer, you can imagine how much of an impact that has on their bottom line.
Right. All right, thank you, Miriam. Now, let's move on to our final part of this webinar, where we'll have a look, just a closer look at the Strattic dashboard, and we'll see how you can get started. Then we'll finish with a short FAQ session where Miriam will answer some frequently asked questions. So let's just go ahead and share your screen and check out the dashboard. And maybe you can talk a little bit about getting started on Strattic, whether it's migrating or starting from scratch. Please, go ahead.
Okay, so anyone can try out Strattic for free. Nothing required, no credit card. Just go to our site, click free trial, and sign up, and you can immediately get started. Out of the gate, when you sign up for Strattic, you will see in the dashboard it says Add Site. So you can add your first site in Strattic. You can give it a name. And at that point, you can choose to install WordPress as usual, which is standard WordPress installation, click through the wizard, etc. Or you can also migrate another site into Strattic to test it out. I think most of our users end up migrating sites because that gives them the full experience. And we have a really useful and easy to follow guide on how to migrate your site into Strattic. And also, if you want, our customer success team can help you do that if you prefer. Once you've migrated their site into Strattic, then you can create your first static replica. You click the Strattic Publish button, which I showed you. Your first publish will be what we call a full publish because it has to capture everything on the site and deploy to the static environment.
Right.
So that first publish will take longer. Once it's ready, you will be notified. And then from that point on, you can edit your site as usual and click the Strattic Publish button to push any changes to the static replica of the site. You can try that out for 14 days. at which point, if you decide to upgrade, then you can also point a custom domain at the static version of the site. So in the case of my dental site, the domain is customized as well.
And that is then the live site.
And that's the live site that the internet will visit.
Right. Okay, great. So now it's time to answer some frequently asked questions. Miriam, are you ready?
Of course I'm ready. I love answering questions.
All right, let's start with the first one. Do SEO plugins like Yoast and Rank Math work on Strattic?
Yes, they do. Very early on, when we were developing the Strattic product, it was important to us to make sure that all of the elements of SEO that relate to a website were supported and compatible with Strattic. So first, we made sure that Strattic was completely compatible with Yoast. We're big fans of Yoast. And so users can modify, their meta tags and have the XML sitemap and manipulate their robots.txt, all that through Yoast, and all of that will get deployed to the static version of the site. We support Yoast 301 redirects, functionality, etc. More recently, we rolled out support for Rank Math as well as its popularity increased. We want to make sure that not only are the sites as fast, secure, and scalable as possible, but also that marketers and SEO professionals can get the most out of the site from that perspective as well.
Right. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Can I host my WordPress site somewhere else and use Strattic?
Strattic is an end-to-end platform. What that means is that all of the components, from the WordPress site to the static site to the CDN, are all part of our platform. You need to host the WordPress site with Strattic in order to gain the benefits of the static replica. The reason for that is that in order for us to generate a perfect replica of the site and do it quickly and easily for the user, we need to control the entire environment. But as you can see, the WordPress hosting environment is the same as you would get anywhere else, so you don't have to learn anything new, and you just have it there and click our button.
So it's all on Strattic?
It's all on Strattic.
Okay, cool. Next question. How can I make sure that the WordPress site is Strattic compatible?
A great way to test if your WordPress site is Strattic compatible is to sign up for our free trial and migrate a copy of your site into Strattic, which you can absolutely do, and then generate the first static version of that site. Then you can click around, test it, see how it turned out in its static format, and make sure that everything works okay.
Great, thanks. Next one, how long does it take to publish my site on Strattic?
The publication time for a site depends on the size of the site. So I mentioned that the first publish, which is a full publish, can take some time. If it's a huge site, it really can take hours. So you need to sit back and be patient.
That's only the first time.
It's only the first time. And also note that if you've migrated a copy of a live site into Strattic, your live site keeps running. So even you can just go to sleep and wake up or whatever, however long it takes if it's such a huge site to get the first static replica generated. We do offer something that's very unique in the static site generation space, which is what we call incremental builds. So you don't only have to do full publishes every time you make a change to your site. You can choose to do more focused and faster publishes. There's the selective publish, which I showed you when I published to the About page. Then we have a middle ground type of publish, which we call quick publish. That's really good for if you write a new blog post. You want to make sure that that post gets published and any related categories get updated in tags, maybe the homepage and your XML sitemap. That's what it updates.
So it's a little bit more than the selective one. So sort of taxonomies and
exactly.
And other things.
It captures all of that. So it takes longer than the selective, but it's obviously way faster than the full publish. And once you've published a blog post, if you want to make changes to that from that point on, you really only need to use the selective publish.
All right, thank you. Let's go on to the next question, which is, will WooCommerce work on a Strattic website?
That is a great question. So I think I mentioned that WooCommerce is a particularly dynamic type of website because, for example, the shopping cart depends heavily on the database and the processing server in order to be managed. So if you generate a static replica of the site, let's say the catalog might work perfectly and you can browse through all the pages, but when you want to make a purchase, that's where it gets complicated.
So it basically needs that direct connection to the database to
server,
be able to process that.
Exactly. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to run WooCommerce on Strattic, but just standard WooCommerce without making significant changes to it won't work. We do have some WooCommerce sites on Strattic. Either it's a website where they just wanted the catalog functionality, but they don't have a shopping cart there, so that works obviously. And we have some customers that wanted Strattic for the security and performance values that we bring. And so they did some custom work on their own shopping cart. So they're actually running WooCommerce, and they kind of outsource or use a third-party shopping cart for that part of the site, and then it works great. So they get the speed, security, and scalability of Strattic, which is actually even more important on an e-commerce site, I would say, than just on a regular content site. And the site works.
Why exactly is it more important?
Everything that we offer, which is the speed, security, scalability, and also, by the way, peace of mind is something that our customers mention a lot. They don't have to worry about their site suddenly breaking or crashing in the middle of the night and things like that. It becomes, in some ways, more important on an e-commerce site, because if a e-commerce site is slow, they're literally losing dollars every second that it's taking a site to load. If a WooCommerce site gets a lot of traffic because suddenly everyone's interested in the product and it slows down the server or crashes, that's the worst possible time for it to happen, when suddenly everyone wants to buy their thing. And in terms of security, a WooCommerce site tends to have more types of sensitive information in it related to the customers or the users.
Right.
And so you really don't want a breach to happen there. And add to that WooCommerce has so many more moving parts, I would say that it potentially has more opportunities for hackers. So that's even more serious in the case of an e-commerce site. So that's why we have these customers who invested in creating their own custom shopping cart that supports their WooCommerce use.
They continue using WooCommerce, and they've got their own custom solution for the shopping cart. But there are also other third-party services that provide solutions for e-commerce websites on Strattic, right?
Right, that's correct. I mentioned the static tools directory, so we have an e-commerce category there. We have thoroughly tested a tool called Equid. It works great with WordPress and with Strattic. The nice thing about using a tool like that is that they're really expert at e-commerce, so the Equid product itself offers a lot of value. But then you get to use WordPress for the content management, which is the best content management experience available. And in the click of a button, you have a static site, so you kind of get the best of all worlds in that type of scenario.
All right, thank you. Now for the last question, what does the hosting include?
Our hosting offering is an end-to-end platform, as I mentioned, and it includes 3 environments. For those who are interested, we've built out the Strattic platform within the AWS cloud service. AWS is Amazon Web Services. And so we use Amazon services to power our offering. The first part of the environment is the WordPress hosting environment. And that's where your WordPress site is, looks the same as usual. The difference is that it's containerized. So that's part of the Amazon offering. And it spins down when not in use for an additional layer of security. And also, it's blocked from the internet at large. So only people with permission can access that site. So that's environment number 1. The second environment is the static file storage. Once we've generated the site in a static format, we need to host those files somewhere. We don't host them in the same type of environment as WordPress. We need to put it in an environment that is unique for static files so that it's as efficient and fast as possible. And so we use Amazon's S3 service for that. And then that static version of the site is fully served up through a CDN, Content Delivery Network. And we offer all of our users out of the box Amazon's CloudFront CDN. It's an excellent high-quality CDN that makes sure that the site is delivered quickly to everyone wherever they're located.
All right, thank you for answering so many questions. And that's it. Our webinar has come to an end. So thank you for joining us. And thank you, Miriam, for taking part and giving us really good insights into the world of Strattic websites. And we hope that the concepts of headless and static WordPress make more sense now, and that by combining them on Strattic's platform, they're able to generate clean WordPress websites that are highly secure and load incredibly fast, especially when traffic increases exponentially, which could be during campaigns, for example. Also, we hope that many of your questions were answered during this webinar, and we invite you to check out the link in the description below to learn more about Strattic and start your free trial to test the waters and see if Strattic is the right solution for you. So thank you, and ciao for now.